The Korean mafia boss just wanted to know why his black maid missed work. What he found made him furious. Who touched her? Chin Junik growled, his voice barely above a whisper, the tattoos on his neck pulsing as his jaw clenched tight. He stared at the bandages covering her face, her swollen eye, the bruises around her throat. No man breathes after doing this. Those were the last words he said before storming out of the penthouse. 20 minutes later, the entire Korean syndicate was mobilized, hunting for the man who dared lay hands on what belonged to the boss. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This one is going to shake you. Smash that subscribe button because you do not want to miss what happens next. Chin Wong woke at 5 o'clock in the morning expecting tea brewing and breakfast ready like it had been every single day for 3 years. The penthouse was silent. No Ella moving quietly through the kitchen with her efficient invisible presence. No fresh tea, no warm breakfast, nothing. Chin stood in his massive kitchen, silk robe revealing the ink across his chest, confused because Ella Mitchell had never been late. Not once in 3 years. Not for illness, not for weather, not for anything. In his world, silence meant danger. Chin Wang's eyes opened at exactly 5 a.m. No alarm. His body had been trained to wake at this hour for 20 years, ever since his father first put a gun in his hands and told him that discipline was the difference between predators and prey. He lay still for a moment, listening. The penthouse should have been alive by now. The soft clink of porcelain. The whisper of slippers on marble. The faint comforting smell of tea brewing in the kitchen. Ella always arrived at 4:30, moving through his home like a ghost, preparing everything before he rose. But this morning there was nothing, only silence. Chin sat up slowly, his bare chest covered in black ink that told the story of his rise through the Korean syndicate. Dragons curled around his shoulders. Names of fallen brothers marked his ribs. The symbol of his organization sat directly over his heart. He walked to the kitchen, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The counter was bare. The kettle was cold. No steam rose from his favorite cup. No breakfast waited on the table where he took his morning meetings. Ella Mitchell had worked for him for 3 years. In that time, she had never been late. Not once. Not when she had the flu and showed up anyway until he sent her home. Not when the subway flooded and she walked 40 blocks through the rain. Not when her grandmother died and she still appeared at 4:30 the next morning, eyes red but hands steady. She was the most reliable person in his entire organization, more dependable Chin Wong his lieutenants, more consistent Chin Wong his accountants, more loyal Chin Wong men who had sworn blood oaths to his family. Something was wrong. Chin pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Her voice, soft and professional, asked him to leave a message. He hung up and called again. Voicemail again. Voicemail. His jaw tightened. He pressed the intercom to the security station. Ella Mitchell. Has anyone seen her this morning? A pause. Then his head of security, a thick-necked man named Kong, responded, "No, sir. She hasn't checked in at the service entrance. We assumed she called in sick. She didn't call." Hans's voice dropped to something cold. "Pull her address from the employee files. Now, sir, she lives in Koreatown, the old district. That neighborhood as I know what that neighborhood is." Chin was already walking to his bedroom, pulling a black shirt over his tattooed torso. "Have my car ready in 5 minutes. Boss, I can send men to check on her. You don't need to." 5 minutes. The line went dead. Chin Wong had not driven himself anywhere in 3 years. He had not visited any neighborhood below the 40th floor of the city's wealth. He had not concerned himself with the personal lives of his employees. But Soraya's silence screamed louder. Chin Wong any alarm. And in his world, silence only meant one thing. The building was worse Chin Han had imagined. Crumbling brick. Graffiti covering the walls. A security gate hung off its hinges. Useless. He paid Ella well. Why did she live in a place like this? He didn't know she sent most of her money home to her mother in Atlanta. Didn't know about the medical bills piling up. The little brother she was putting through trade school. The sacrifices she made in silence while keeping his penthouse immaculate. Apartment 4B, 3rd floor. No elevator. Chin climbed the stairs two at a time, his expensive shoes echoing against concrete stained with years of neglect. The smell of mildew and old cooking oil hung thick in the air. This was a world he had clawed his way out of decades ago. A world he never intended to visit again. Then he heard it shouting. A man's voice, ugly with rage, coming from behind a door at the end of the hall. And beneath it, something that made Hans's blood turn to ice. A woman's cry. Ella's cry. He didn't knock. Hans' foot connected with the door just below the lock. The cheap wood exploded inward, splinters flying across a cramped living room with second-hand furniture and family photos on the walls. The scene inside stopped his heart. Ella was on the floor curled into a ball, her arms raised to protect her face. Her neatly pulled back hair had come undone wild around her shoulders. Blood trickled from her lip. One eye was already swelling shut. Bandages from earlier wounds Chin hadn't known existed, were visible on her arms. Standing over her was a man. Late 20s the tank top stretched over muscles built from anger, not discipline. His fist was raised, ready to strike again. Marcus. For one eternal second, the three of them froze. Then Ella looked up and saw Chin in the doorway. Her eyes, those steady, calm eyes that had greeted him every morning for 3 years, were filled with something he had never seen before. Terror, not of Marcus, of Chin seeing her like this, broken, vulnerable, human. That look shattered something inside Chin Junik that he didn't know still existed. Marcus's reaction was faster Chin his intelligence. He saw the tattoos crawling up Hans's neck. Saw the cold murder in those dark eyes. Saw death standing in doorway wearing a black shirt and designer shoes. He bolted. Marcus scrambled across the room and threw himself through the window onto the fire escape. The sound of his footsteps clanging down metal stairs faded into the morning. Chin let him go. Not because he was merciful, because right now only one thing mattered. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside Soraya. I've got you. Chin didn't hesitate. He scooped Soraya into his arms like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest with a gentleness that would have shocked anyone who knew him. She tried to protest, tried to say she could walk, but her voice came out broken and weak. Don't speak, Chin said quietly. Just breathe. He carried her down 3 flights of stairs, past neighbors who peered through cracked doors, and quickly looked away. In this neighborhood, you didn't see anything. You didn't remember faces, especially not the face of a man with tattoos crawling up his neck and murder in his eyes. His black Mercedes waited at the curb, engine still running. Chin placed Soraya in the back seat as carefully as if she were made of glass, then slid in beside her. He pulled her head onto his lap, his hand resting protectively over her hair. Drive, he told the guard behind the wheel. Now the ride to the penthouse took 12 minutes. Ella drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow, her body trembling. Chin watched her face, the split lip, the swollen eye, the bruises forming like storm clouds across her dark skin. Each mark was a debt. Each wound was a promise. Marcus would pay for all of it. The private surgeon was waiting when they arrived. Dr. Yun had served the organization for 15 years, asking no questions, keeping no records. He examined Ella with professional efficiency while Chin stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching every movement. 2 cracked ribs, severe contusions, possible concussion. Doctor. Yun's voice was clinical. She needs rest and monitoring. No hospital. Too many questions. She stays here. Chin said it wasn't a request. They put her in Han's bedroom. The master suite with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, its silk sheets, its bed large enough for 4 people. Ella looked impossibly small in the center of it. Fragile, lost in a sea of luxury she had cleaned 1,000 times but never inhabited, Chin pulled a chair beside the bed and sat. He didn't move for 3 hours. He watched her breathe, watched her face twitch in troubled sleep. Watched the rise and fall of her chest beneath the blanket. At some point, her hands slip from under the covers. Bandaged fingers, swollen knuckles, evidence of how hard she had tried to defend herself. Chin reached out and took her hand in his. Her skin was warm against his callous palm. "I will find him," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "And I will make him feel everything he did to you. This I swear." The city glittered outside the window. Chin Wang did not sleep. Zarya woke to unfamiliar softness, silk sheets against her skin, sunlight streaming through windows that stretched higher. Chin Wang her entire apartment. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then the pain hit. Her ribs screamed. Her face throbbed. Every breath reminded her of Marcus's fists. She sat up too fast and gasped. Clu Chin Wang her side. That's when she saw him. Chin Junik sitting in a chair beside the bed, still wearing the same black shirt from that morning, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept. Mr. Han. Ella's voice cracked. She tried to swing her legs off the bed, tried to stand. "I'm so sorry. I should have called. I'll make breakfast right now. I'll stop." The single word froze her in place. Chin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You will not apologize. You will not make breakfast. You will not return to that apartment." His voice was calm, but beneath it ran something molten. "Ever." Ella's eyes filled with tears. She'd been fighting since Marcus's first punch. "Am I fired?" Something flickered across Han's face. Pain. Anger. Something she couldn't name. "You are not fired." He stood slowly, towering over her, but somehow making himself less threatening. "You are under my protection now. No one will touch you again." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young Korean man entered, tall and lean with kind eyes that softened when he saw Ella's injuries. She recognized him. "Minho, Hans's most trusted lieutenant. Minho will guard you while I'm gone," Chin said, already moving toward the door. "Anything you need, he provides. You don't leave this penthouse." "Where are you going?" The question escaped before Ella could stop it. Chin paused at the threshold. He didn't turn around to handle business. Then he was gone. 30 minutes later, Chin descended into the basement of a restaurant in Koreatown that hadn't served food in 15 years. The room was filled with men who operated in shadows. Informants, enforcers, hunters who found people who didn't want to be found. Chin stood before them, his presence commanding instant silence. Marcus Thompson, late 20s, last seen fleeing an apartment building on 7th Street this morning. Han's voice was ice-wrapped in velvet. "He beat a woman under my protection. I want him found." One of the hunters shifted. "Dead or alive, boss?" Han's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides, tattoos flexing across his knuckles. "Alive." The word dripped with dark promise. "I want him breathing when I find him. What happens after that is between me and him." Marcus made it 43 hours. He thought he was smart, ditched his phone, paid cash for a bus ticket to Nevada, kept his head down, hood up, eyes on the floor. He thought he could disappear into the vastness of America, become nobody, start over somewhere the Korean mob couldn't reach. He was wrong. Han's hunters found him at a Greyhound station on the outskirts of the city trying to board a 2 a.m. bus. They moved fast and quiet. Professional. One moment Marcus was Clue Chin Wang his ticket. The next he was in the back of a van with a bag over his head, screaming threats that no one acknowledged. The basement was cold. Concrete floors, exposed pipes dripping somewhere in the darkness, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across walls that had witnessed confessions and endings for decades. Marcus was strapped to a chair when Chin arrived. The boss descended the stairs slowly, each footstep echoing like a heartbeat. He wore a white shirt this time, sleeves crisp, collar perfect. He looked like a businessman arriving for a meeting. He didn't speak. Marcus started talking immediately. Excuses pouring out like sewage. She's my girl, man. We had a fight. Couples fight. It's none of your business what happens between. Chin rolled up his sleeves. Methodically, precisely. The tattoos on his forearms caught the light. Dragons and symbols and names of men who had crossed him before. Still, he said nothing. The first punch broke Marcus's nose. Blood sprayed across the concrete. The second cracked 2 ribs. The same ribs Marcus had cracked on Ella. Chin worked in silence. No questions. No demands for apology. This wasn't an interrogation. This was education. Every blow was measured, calculated to inflict maximum pain without allowing unconsciousness. Marcus needed to feel all of it. Please, Marcus sobbed between strikes. Please, I'm sorry. I'll never touch her again. Chin paused. His knuckles were split. Blood dripped from his hands onto the floor. He leaned close to Marcus's ruined face, his voice barely a whisper. You're right. You won't. The punishment continued for another hour. When Chin finally climbed the stairs, his white shirt was stained crimson. His face was expressionless. His hands trembled slightly, not from exhaustion, but from the effort of stopping. Marcus was still breathing, barely. 3 weeks passed like water, finding new paths through stone. Ella's bruises faded from purple to yellow to memory. Her ribs healed. The swelling around her eye disappeared, revealing the steady gaze Chin had grown accustomed to over 3 years. But something else was changing, too. Something deeper. She started cooking again. Not because Chin asked her to. Not because she felt obligated, but because one morning she woke before dawn and felt the pull of routine, the comfort of creating something warm for someone else. Chin found her in the kitchen at 5:30 a.m. moving through cabinets she knew better. Chin Wong her own apartment, preparing a breakfast she'd made 1,000 times before. You should be resting, he said from the doorway. Ella didn't startle. She'd heard him coming. I wanted to, she said simply. For you. They ate together that morning. Chin at the head of his massive table. Ella sitting beside him instead of serving and disappearing. She told him about her mother in Atlanta, about her brother's dreams of becoming an electrician, about why she sent every spare dollar home and lived in a place she could barely afford. Chin listened. Really listened. And something inside his chest that had been frozen for decades began to thaw. This became their ritual. Morning meals shared in comfortable silence or quiet conversation. Chin discovered that Ella laughed easily when she wasn't afraid. That she hummed old gospel songs while she cooked. That she dreamed of owning a small restaurant someday. He also discovered jealousy. It happened slowly, then all at once. He would come home to find Ella in the garden with Minho, their heads bent together in easy conversation. Her laughter would float through the windows, bright and unguarded, a sound Chin realized he had never drawn from her himself. When he entered a room, that lightness vanished. Her shoulders would straighten. Her smile would become polite, professional. The warmth would retreat behind something careful and controlled. She was grateful to him. She respected him, but she still feared what he was. Minho was different. Minho was safe. Minho didn't have blood permanently stained into his knuckles. Chin watched them from his office window one afternoon, Ella laughing at something Minho said, touching his arm with casual affection. The jealousy burned. But beneath it was something worse. Understanding. Chin had made his decision. He would ask Soraya to stay, not as a maid, as something more. He didn't have the words for what exactly. Wife felt too formal, partner too casual, but he knew he couldn't return to mornings without her presence. Couldn't imagine his penthouse empty of her humming, her warmth, her quiet strength. He had a plan, a formal arrangement. Financial security for her family. Protection forever. Everything he could offer wrapped in the only language he truly understood, control. The velvet box sat in his desk drawer. Inside was his mother's ring, smuggled out of Seoul 30 years ago, the only piece of his old life he'd kept. He'd never imagined giving it to anyone until her. Chin was walking toward the garden to find Ella when he heard voices drifting through an open window. He stopped. Something in the tone made him stay hidden. He terrifies me sometimes. Ella's voice, soft but honest. The way he looks at people, the way silence follows him. I'm grateful for everything he's done. Minho, I owe him my life. But what? Minho's voice was gentle, patient. A long pause. Then Ella spoke again, and her words cut through Chin like a blade. When I'm with you, I can breathe. You listen. You ask questions and actually want the answers. Han, he protects me. But I don't know if he sees me or if he just sees something that belongs to him now. Hans's hand pressed flat against the wall. His chest tightened. With you, Ella continued, I feel like a person. With him, I feel like a possession he's decided to keep safe. There's a difference. Minho said something Chin couldn't hear. Then Ella laughed. That light, unguarded laugh that never emerged when Chin was present. He stepped back from the window. The velvet box suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his pocket. His mother's ring meant for a woman who would never wear it. Not because she didn't care for him, but because his power wasn't shelter. It was a wall. Everything he built, the empire, the fear, the respect had become a prison. Not for others, for himself. He could protect Ella from every threat in the world. But he couldn't protect her from what he was. Chin returned to his office and placed the ring back in the drawer. Some battles couldn't be won with force. Marcus had been in prison for 4 months when he made his move. The beating Chin delivered should have broken him. Instead, it fed a rage that grew in the darkness of his cell like something poisonous. He made connections inside violent men who owed favors to other violent men. A network of hatred that stretched beyond prison walls. The transfer happened on a Tuesday. Routine movement between facilities. 3 guards, 1 van, a stretch of empty highway. Marcus's people were waiting. 2 guards died before anyone could radio for help. The 3rd was left alive to deliver a message. Tell the Korean, I'm coming for what's mine. Chin received the news at 11 p.m. By 11:15, he had tripled security at the penthouse. By 11:30, he had moved Ella and Minho to the estate outside the city, a fortress surrounded by walls and armed men. It wasn't enough. Marcus had 4 months to plan. 4 months to study Han's organization, 4 months to find the weak points. The power went out at 2 a.m. Ella woke to absolute darkness and the distant sound of gunfire. She scrambled out of bed, heart pounding as the estate erupted into chaos. Shouts echoed through hallways. Glass shattered somewhere downstairs. The crack of weapons split the night. Minho burst through her door. Gun drawn. Stay behind me. Don't make a sound. They moved through black corridors, emergency lights flickering red. Bodies lay in doorways. Han's men caught off guard by the coordinated assault. Marcus hadn't come alone. He'd brought soldiers. Chin found them on the second floor, his white shirt splattered with blood that wasn't his own. His eyes were wild, scanning every shadow. "They're inside the walls," he said, voice tight. "6 men, maybe more. Marcus is leading them." A bullet tore through the window beside Ella's head. She screamed as Minho pulled her down, covering her body with his. "The safe room," Chin commanded. Now they ran. Gunfire chased them through the estate that had become a war zone. Paintings exploded off walls. Chandeliers crashed to marble floors. The home Chin had built into a sanctuary was being torn apart around them. And somewhere in the darkness, Marcus was hunting, coming to finish what he'd started. They almost made it to the safe room. Marcus stepped out of the shadows 10 feet from the reinforced door. Gun raised, smile twisted with 4 months of hatred. "Found you." Everything happened in seconds. Minho moved without hesitation, shoving Ella behind him as Marcus fired. The bullet caught Minho in the chest, spinning him sideways. He crumpled against the wall, blood spreading across his shirt, but his hands still reached for Ella, still trying to shield her. "Minho!" Ella screamed, dropping beside him. Marcus advanced, gun leveled at her head. "You think you can leave me? Think some Korean thug can take what's mine?" He never finished the sentence. Chin came from the darkness like a demon unleashed. He hit Marcus low and hard, driving him into the wall with the force of every ounce of rage he'd been containing. The gun clattered away. Han's fists did the rest. He broke Marcus's right arm, then his left, then his kneecaps, one after the other. Precise strikes that ensured the man would never walk properly again, never raise his hand against anyone again. Marcus screamed, begged, sobbed. Chin raised his fist for the killing blow. Chin Ella's voice. Quiet, steady, even now. He turned. She was pressing her hands against Minho's wound, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes held his. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't become this for me." Han's fist trembled in the air. Every instinct screamed to finish it, to end the threat permanently, but her eyes, those steady, brave eyes that had seen him as a monster and chosen to believe he could be more. He lowered his hand. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Han's man had called it in. Marcus would spend the rest of his broken life in a maximum security cell. Some fates were worse. Chin Wong death. 1 year later, Chin stood in a sunlit nursery holding a baby girl wrapped in soft pink blankets. His tattooed hands, hands that had delivered death, cradled her with impossible gentleness. Ella watched from the doorway. Minho's arm around her waist. The wedding ring on her finger caught the light. She had never looked more beautiful. More at peace. "She has your eyes," Chin said quietly to Ella. "She has your stubbornness," Minho replied, grinning. Chin almost smiled. Almost. He placed the baby back in her crib and walked to the door. Ella caught his hand as he passed. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything, for letting go." Chin squeezed her fingers once, then released them. He walked out into the afternoon sun, back toward his waiting car, back toward the shadows where he belonged. Behind him, he heard Ella's laughter, Minho's voice, the sounds of a family he had saved but would never be part of. The loneliness was familiar, but beneath it now lived something new, peace. He had given her what she needed, not possession, not control, freedom. And in doing so, Chin Junik had finally set himself free, too. This story proves one thing. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up when everything falls apart. Subscribe if you believe love is a choice, not a claim. Comment if Chin made you cry and share this with everyone who needs to know that sometimes the greatest act of love is becoming someone's instead of their cage. One missed morning changed 3 lives forever. Please subscribe for more.